I read 8 books in January. Stick around and I'll tell you all about them. Hello readers! It has been a while for me. We're in 2021 now. I feel like I'm kind of playing catch up. Last year, so much stuff, man. Happy 2021! It has been a while. I feel like I haven't filmed a video in quite a few months. Things have changed over this time. I have an extra dog now. I'm caring for my brother's dog. His name is Doobie. But if you hear jingles, if you hear nails on the floor, I'm trying to keep the dogs in the kitchen so that they don't mess with my setup. We have a baby gate up. We'll see how this works. So I read 8 books in January and hopefully I can recap them for you. The first one was Roomies by Christina Lauren, and after being gifted in a holidays by my friend Chloe from the Brunette Bibliophile, I was very eager to devour all the Christina Lauren books that I had in my possession. I had already read The Unhoneymooners and I really liked that. I gave that 4 stars. And so we decided to do Roomies as a buddy read. The main character in this story works in the theater district and she ends up developing a crush for a musician that plays music in the subway. I don't know if I want to say too much about this one because I feel like the synopsis spoiled so much of it. The story is basically about how a relationship develops between her and this musician. I'm not sure I love this one quite as much as In a Holidays, but there were still swoon-worthy moments. It seemed like the story took a bit of a turn. I want to say maybe like 3/4 of the way through it, the focus shifted. Instead of being on the romance, it became a lot about the main character and finding herself, and I don't know if I necessarily loved the shift, but outside of that, I still enjoy Christina Lauren's writing, and of course I'm going to keep picking up other books, and as a matter of fact, I read another one. The other Christina Lauren book I read this month is Hating You, Dating You, and this premise was not really something I was super interested in, but again, I was trying to buddy read it with Chloe from the Brunette Bibliophile, and I listened to the audiobook. Probably if I had had the hard copy of the book and I was reading it that way, I might have been able to get more attached to the characters and the story, but it kind of felt like it didn't get super interesting for me until maybe about 50% of the way through, and then I was really hooked and wanted to find out what was happening. But the main character worked in Hollywood. She was an agent. She worked with a specific company, and there was like some weird stuff going on with her boss where he wasn't the greatest person. He was slightly misogynistic. There were just some issues, but there was actually a merger that took place between 2 different companies with agents, and somebody that she had gone on a date with ended up being added to her company. And so there was just some friction in regards to, can we date and work together? Is this going to work? What's going to happen? And so that's mainly what the book was about, that kind of dynamic. There were quite a few parts where I laughed out loud, and I think those funny moments are kind of what Christina Lauren does really well, in addition to the swoon. As I said, I listened to the audiobook for this. And the other thing that I had a little bit of an issue with was that the people that narrated Hating You, Dating You were the same people that did my favorite Half Night Stand. And while they are good actors, there's something about their voices that make me picture them in a very specific way. So it's kind of hard for that vision to line up with some of the illustrations on the cover of the book in regards to what I expect the characters to look like. But again, I gave it 4 stars, and I'm going to keep picking up Christina Lauren books because I do enjoy them. The other book I read is The Test by Sylvain Nouvelle, and this is a short story, or more like a novella. And the reason I finally picked this up was because Books and Lala had talked about it, and she described it as being like an episode of Black Mirror. And I think that's a perfect description of this story. It's very short. I think maybe it's like somewhere between 1 and 3 hours if you're listening to the audiobook, and it's about a guy who's taking a citizenship test, and he's telling you about himself as he's answering these questions, and then something happens while he's taking the test. It was definitely a wild ride, but worth checking out, and I think it'll leave you with lots to think about. I gave the test 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. The Libri Labra book club read Death's End by Cixin Liu, and that was the last book in the Remembrance of Earth's Past series. If you're interested in following along with our discussion, I will go ahead and link to it in the description below. I'm not going to say too much about this one because it is the last book in a trilogy, but there was lots of time jumping, and I think I get a little bit lost like that. Like, I just felt like my brain couldn't handle everything that was happening. Overall, with the series itself, I struggled a little bit because there is a lot of hard science, and as soon as they started explaining things, my brain kind of checked out. But at some point, I would like to go back and kind of reread it, maybe really take my time, maybe look up some things, do whatever it is I need to further understand it. I did enjoy it as I was reading it, but this last book was really long, and it was hard to kind of cram into a month to then have the discussion. But it was described as wildly imaginative by Barack Obama. There is some first encounter stuff in this series. Because I knew that most of my struggles were me and me not grasping the material, I still gave it 4 stars. And again, I hope to return back to the series at some point in the maybe distant future. The next book I read was It Only Happens in the Movies by Holly Bourne, and this was definitely a surprise. It was a surprise in regards to where the story went. I did listen to the audiobook for this, and I thought the narrator did a really good job. It was very funny, but also kind of addressed some heavy material. The main character, she was struggling with the fact that her parents had separated, and it wasn't really a great separation. And she was also trying to figure out what her feelings about love were. She wanted to be an actress, so she was very interested in movies, and there were lots of movies referenced in this book, which I think was something that made it really fun. I'm still hoping to go back and kind of check out some of those movies, but it talks about romances and rom-coms, and, you know, does stuff like that really happen? She was just kind of asking herself these questions as she witnessed, you know, her parents' relationship fall apart. She wasn't sure if she believed in love, and that's kind of a lot of what she was trying to figure out in this book. I really liked it, and I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. For January, the Libri Labra book club read Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. I listened to the audiobook for this, but also read the hardcover. If you're interested in checking out our discussion, I'll be sure to link to it in the description below. The audiobook for this is narrated by Will Wheaton, who I think does a really good job. I was really looking forward to this book, and although it did have its own storyline and there were some interesting things going on with the plot, it also felt a little too similar to Ready Player One in regards to the game they were playing within the book and how they had to collect certain pieces and all the pop culture references. Dear God, the pop culture references. I don't know if I forgot how many there were in Ready Player One. Maybe when Ready Player One came out, we weren't used to having that kind of amount of pop culture references that a lot of us just kind of, you know, ate it up. But I didn't want to do it again. In this book, I really couldn't. And they just felt so crammed into the story. And I wanted to read the actual plot. And there was just so many pop culture references that felt nonsensical a lot of the times, and then he would have to explain why they were even there, and I just didn't love this book as much as I loved Ready Player One, and I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads. If you picked this up and you did enjoy it, I would love to hear what you loved about it, whether or not the pop culture references bothered you at all. I just honestly wanted more of the characters and more of the story without having to wade through, through all the pop culture references. For the BookTube Chicks book club, I read Goddess in the Machine by Laura Beth Johnson, and this is a YA sci-fi. In this story, the main character was in cryosleep. She was only supposed to be in cryosleep for like I think 100 years, but it turned into like 1,000. And when she woke up, everybody was calling her goddess and she didn't understand why. And so she was just kind of figuring out her life, figuring out what happened, figuring out why she ended up in cryosleep so long and she didn't wake up when she was supposed to. She was trying to figure out where her family was and everybody else that she was on the ship with. And it kind of went back and forth in two different perspectives. The second perspective contains somewhat of a made-up language, and at first it bothered me a little bit and I thought it was kind of like cheesy and annoying, but as I got through the book, you start to kind of see the rhythm and rhyme of what they're saying and how they're saying it. And, you know, by the time I got to the end of the book, I was texting people fishes and wishes and all sorts of stuff. So I kind of enjoyed that aspect of it. Overall, I'm not sure I was like super attached to the entire story. I'd say I'd give it like 3 stars. As of right now, I'm still interested enough to pick up the second book. It's a duology, but I'm not 100% sure. It was more like a high 2.8. And the last book I read in January was for Buzzwordathon. The word was dream, and I ended up reading Dreamology by Lucy Keating. I have had this book in my possession for quite some time. The synopsis sounded so me. I've talked about this a few times. I am a lucid dreamer. I'm very much about the dream world and the dream plane, and I can control my dreams. And I've just had some very, very, very interesting dream-related experiences. So this book was about a girl who was regularly dreaming about a boy, and eventually she goes to school, starts the school year, and she sees him in her classroom. So of course lots of questions arise, like, oh my god, this person is real. How is he real? Does he know me? Are we really meeting each other in our dreams? What's going on? And you kind of get to find out more information in regards to that specifically. There were a few areas in this book that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know if I can exactly explain. I think maybe it was that the main character made some decisions, didn't think too much about what she was doing, didn't seem like she cared too much about the outcome. Maybe they were just really selfish decisions. I mean, I get it, right? You dream about a guy every night and you meet him in real life. Like, that's destiny. Like, you can't let that person go. But there was just some things. The other thing I kind of didn't like is that I didn't really feel much attachment to the love interest. There wasn't anything like super special about him. It didn't feel like there were no real outstanding qualities. There was nothing that like really set him apart to where I could understand her infatuation with him. So because of that, I did give it 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I'm not sure if anybody's still thinking about January wrap-ups, but let me know what your favorite book was for January in the comments below. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe.